Explained by the Billy Meier contacts, mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Extraterrestrials Part 8 Note. This section generally deals with the existence of various extraterrestrial civilizations, their histories, societies, cultures, behaviors, technologies, etc. An excellent summary of the UFO, extraterrestrial phenomenon, is given by Billy Meier in his article Extraterrestrials, found in Contact Report 257. Drawings and photorealistic renditions of some extraterrestrials may be seen at the end of Contact Reports 830 and 836. A list of extraterrestrials who have contacted Billy Meier can be found at the FIGU website. Contact Report 794.
But I would like to say that in the past it was also common for the military to play an important role and for wars to be fought until...
I know, until the giant sphere appeared on Era, etc. more than 50,000 years ago, and everything quickly improved and changed, as the military was also abolished at that time and true peace actually came about.
Contact Report 795.
But with him, I not only learned a lot through journeys into the past and the future, which prove to me today that many things are not true, what the scientists assume and spread as truth. Many things were really quite different from what they claim. For example, what actually happened with the Maya, or with other ancient peoples, and that foreigners really did come to Earth from other worlds, from far away and outside the Sol sphere of influence, from the distant expanses of the Dern universe, also the long skulls. What I wrote at that time, when it was, I do not remember, in response to a request to after which began. The long skulled were also in Babel, in Egypt, in South America, and in Asia, where they ruled, whereby Svath gave me the opportunity to check everything.
You have retrieved and created the correct peace sign, which has been prevalent among us on Era and in our Federation for many millennia, conveying peace that is real and firmly exists.
Contact Report 799.
That is unfortunately the case, because the Earthlings simply allow themselves to be directed and let themselves be ruled over without daring and mustering the courage to say what would be necessary. The peoples are like will-less cows that are jumped on and ruled over by thuggish bulls and do not dare to stand up to them.
What you say we are aware of. We know that this has been so since time immemorial and will remain so for a long time to come, and for such a long time until the bulk of humanity finally awakens and demands its rights of being independent, so that it is finally no longer deviously and incorrectly guided according to the will of those in power, but is guided justly according to what it wants and determines for itself in common with its own kind, uninfluenced by vocal propaganda.
You are thinking of the libertarian system that you have and maintain on Era?
Yes, you know that very well, and this maintains the free opinion of the human being as well as of the whole people, which also ensures peace and its freedom, Federation-wide in such a way that between all 274 worlds belonging to the Federation, spread over 702 light years, there is vain peace and freedom.
But tell me, shouldn't we say what is actually connected with the naming of the foreigners, what is behind it, as well as that it is about, and that...
The whole of the connections of the foreigners we must continue to keep quiet about, for far too much depends on it, which reaches far into the future and will change everything to such an extent that, but about that silence is still the order of the day, and you must keep to it, as before.
But I suppose I can bring that in and write down what we talked about, can't I? I'm sure it would also help me for not being asked anymore what and who these foreigners actually are and what their purpose is.
You really must not let any of this be known, because it would also be dangerous for your safety. Your knowledge of the whole of the connections of the foreigners, as we call them, so as not to have to say what they are really about, that should stay with you and not get any further, because it is really too.
Contact Report 802.
Indeed, the whole thing is more than illusory for a long time to come, for that the Earth humans, as emigrants into interstellar space, will ever reach outside the SOL system with their still very primitive technology, also in the future is something that probably does not need to be talked about.
Unless the foreigners, as we now call them, intervene and help, as you once said, the Earth humans will never ever reach galactic space with emigration ships. The foreigners have been particularly active again in the last 2 decades, as you keep saying.
It has been around 20 million years since our distant ancestors first came to Earth, and they kept themselves largely covered up, as did those who followed them all this time after. This has remained so to this day because it was forbidden even then, which has remained so to this day, for the Plejaren to spread out into another universe of creation than just their own dimension. A special regulation arose very early with regard to the sister universe or the DAL universe. Consequently, 2 Plejaren peoples were allowed to settle there, so the Sonair and those you know as the people from whom Asket originated.
Svath, your father, has also told me a lot, and so I also know that the Plejaren used to be warrior peoples and only became peaceful a little more than 52,000 years ago, with the appearance of the orb, which you were then able to enforce throughout the Federation.
It is also questionable whether the foreigners will ever intervene with their more highly developed technology and help the Earth humans so that they can really leave the Earth and SOL space one day. At any rate, it does not yet look as if the foreigners will do anything of the kind, although we do not know whether any plans or arrangements have been made on their part for this, which may not be pleasant for the Earth humans because...
Contact Report 812.
The foreigners that we just call them that, because they are just foreign to the Earthlings, even though we know about them, especially what the high government official, Weaver or something his name was, I do not remember exactly, explained to you, Pate, Wendell Stevens and me in confidence, and then also said that he has to lie in public and hide everything. Note, this may or may not be referring to retired U.S. Air Force colleague Richard Weaver, who oversaw a government report on the Roswell incident in 1994.
Yes, who and where the foreigners are must be kept quiet because...
It's good, because I will keep quiet, and I certainly will not say anything more about it than I have said so far. So I will be careful not to say who and where the foreigners are. I will not say anything about that. The massive exuberant humanity is creating its own demise. And this is happening despite the wild illusions and fantasies of being able to resettle Earth humans on foreign planets, and let them continue to exist through earthly technology and its progress. When the foreigners...
You say things which you should not say.
I do not intend to say it when I call it up, because I am only saying it to you. I can say what I said with dots.
Contact Report 813.
As we know very well, a great deal is negotiated and decided by many of the leaders in all the states of the Earth, which, however, remains secret from the peoples and consequently does not reach the public. Such a thing is not possible with us Plejaren and, moreover, would not be permitted according to our directives. For every member of our Federation and planetary humanity is entitled to know explicitly everything that is discussed and decided by state leaders. Furthermore, it is handled in such a way that every negotiation of state duties, as well as other duties that arise, etc., is carried out reciprocally by other persons, Thus, never the same persons carry out a meeting, deliberation, and decision. Consequently, different persons are involved each time. Furthermore, all meetings, deliberations, decisions, etc., are broadcast planet-wide, so that every single person of the populations of all the planets of our vast Federation and of our planet can interfere or intervene if he or she feels it is necessary. However, this happens so rarely that it is not really worth mentioning.
Contact Report 816.
Do you actually still have primordial creatures on Era, as we do, that supposedly or really exist, such as the Yeti?
Nothing is known about this on our planet.
Contact Report 818.
The neutrality of the peoples of the Pleiaren has represented various state leaders of the Federation for more than 52,000 years and preserves their security and the peace of the state.
Contact Report 819.
Fundamentally, the discovery of a natural dimensional gate, still unknown to our very early ancestors, was the beginning of the whole of your mission. When it happened that about 25 million years ago a lunar structure penetrated this gate, which then found its way into this universe and to Earth, and pushed away another lunar structure of little more than 1,000 kilometers in diameter, which was later captured by the giant planet Saturn. A group of explorers had also followed this lunar formation, and thus found their way to Earth, which has since been visited again and again by our distant descendants, who brought a great many life forms, plants and other goods with them to our planet, which at that time was still called Minotaur, but was renamed Era about 52,000 years ago, when the time of peace spread to our world. Everything old was supposed to be in the past, and so everything that seemed important to our ancestors was given new names, which is why the name of our planet was also subordinated to these changes and given the designation Era, which in our language, which has remained the same since then and has not changed, meant something like soil and earth. This planetary designation was also used when a distant descendant of Nacademion first came to this Earth world about 280,000 years ago and decided that the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life should also be brought into this universe, that is to say, into this dimension of creation, and thus to Earth. Thus it came about that via the level Arahat Athersata later on, at a certain time, downborn energies of the Nacademian could be born on Earth, which then happened for the first time about 14,000 years ago, after which this then further came about with Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, Muhammad, and you, the name of our planet. However, that is to say, Era remained and was then also adopted in the Latin language on Earth, but changed to terra, which meant something like land, and was later also interpreted as earth.
Contact Report 820.
With Svath, I once saw a monster wave in the Pacific. They sweep giant freighters into the depths of the seas when they simply roll over them. The giant thing was 38 meters high, as your father said. So I have been wanting to ask for a long time whether there are also such water monsters on the seas here on Era.
That is so...
Svath explained that planetary internal Earth movements would create such monster waves.
That corresponds to the fact, because internal Earth movements create such monster waves, with magma creating internal displacements that vibrate and spread to the waters of the seas, causing them to churn.
Contact Report 823.
Also, many other planets carry life forms, some of which are very high in their consciousness development and much more advanced and intelligent than the cleverest Earthlings. Other worlds also have lakes, streams, and rivers, forests and seas and much more that also exists on Earth. It's just that the surfaces of other planets are shaped differently than those of Earth. But the Earthlings are not ready, especially the heroes who cannot imagine, do not understand, and do not want to admit that many other worlds in the entire matter belt of the universe are full of life and even carry higher life, which even has highly developed techniques that also allow them to travel through the matter belt, and so on. Very many of our scientists, airheads, I farewell to say, to which also various normal people belong, do not understand that the Earth in the humanly incomprehensible infinity of our creation, which is only a seventh part of all universes of creation, is not alone inseminated and carries life, and partly also more highly intelligent life than exists on our planet.
Contact Report 826.
I was talking to Michael about time, how that is an earthly invention after all. You Ple'aren do not know the concept of time, which is why Michael wonders how you handle everything in order to cope with everything you have to do. Also, with regard to the foreigners, we must be silent, because that extraterrestrials were here in early times, this is vehemently denied, not only by many earthlings of the peoples, but also by unteachable scientists, as well as by those who really know better and have solid evidence for the existence of the far travelers and the fact that these foreigners, as we call them in each case, although we know about their origin, along with the other, about whom we are supposed to keep our mouths shut anyway, were here after all, and that their distant descendants are still here, is something that the triple smart people do not want to admit, or it is simply concealed against their better knowledge.
Contact Report 827.
Even though you, the Ple'aren, know many things and are much more evolved than the Earthlings, you don't know everything.
Contact Report 829.
The question was raised as to how it is with you, whether you also have homosexual men and lesbian women, bisexual, sadistically or masochistically oriented people, etc. in your peoples. If so, this is the second question. What do you call them in terms of gender? For example, here on Earth, we simply call these human beings man and woman.
In terms of gender, we call them no different than Earth humans do, male and female. In our language, we call the man as Sure and the woman as Kagir. Moreover, it is to be explained that it corresponds absolutely to the conditions of nature that with regard to the sexes of human beings, different forms appear. This arises both with the actual human being, as we are, as well as with other human beings, such as giant or small human beings, as well as with human beings who have a completely different appearance from that of pure human beings. That is to say, who are also physically different from us.
Do you mean, for example, the appearance of Asina, because she is, I suppose, an actual human being, but she has a body and a head that are, if I may say so, reptilian? Note, see Contact Reports 90, 91, and 93 for information on Billy's first encounter with Asina.
That is indeed so.
Good. But it is also the case with you and with human beings like Asina that everything is oriented in the same manner with regard to sex, that is to say, sexual acts.
But I want to explain the answer, namely, that everywhere in all universes all differences of the sexual occur in its application. Consequently, normal sexuality, that is to say, aloiophilia, that is to say, heterosexuality is to be understood as bisexual between woman and man, if I may say so. Apart from this, homosexuality also appears, in which this is oriented from man to man, while lesbianism applies to woman with woman. In addition, there is the fact that, outside of the strictness of homosexuality itself and lesbianism, there are also two gender forms of homosexuality and lesbianism. In this form, men, as homosexuals, also have sexual relations with women, as also as lesbians, with men alternately, but these sexual forms are neither abnormal nor to be called repugnant. On the contrary, however, this is often the case on earth, mainly for confused and, as a rule, religiously devout reasons and misunderstandings. As I know, it is considered deviant and even punishable by fine and death penalty. Normality is also to be conceded in a completely natural framework, whereby the bisexual activity, that is to say the heterosexuality of every human being who is predisposed in this respect, is directed towards this alone. However, sexual sadism and sexual masochism are to be mentioned, which as pathological phenomena are natural in this form, but nevertheless correspond to a degeneration. This, however, is absolutely incomprehensible to Earth humans and testifies to how they have fallen prey to the faith and ignorant stupidity, because they are unable to ascertain it according to reality. Consequently, they are unable to understand that everything is degenerate and at the same time naturally given and normal with regard to the effectiveness in this respect. With regard to your question, however, I have to explain that all the forms of sexuality mentioned, because they are natural and normal throughout, are also given with us, as this is given in all spheres of all liveliness in the entire sphere of creation. Therefore, we cannot and must not speak of abnormality in what is purely normal, as Earth humans understand and incorrectly represent it. What is natural is based on the fact of creation, and is therefore a law of that which is natural. And this is not only the case with the human being, but with all genera and species of all living beings, that is, with animals, creatures, and all other life forms. Exceptions to this, however, are pedophilia, bestiality, sadism, and masochism. These degenerations, which, however, are to be called normal as a disease, are based on an addiction which the human beings acquire uncontrollably through fantasies and confusing imagination up to the point of mental morbidity and allows them to degenerate in an illusory way.
With animals, creatures, and all other life forms, it is much rarer than with human beings that sexual manifestations arise that fall outside the usual. Nevertheless, the same thing exists everywhere, not only on Earth, but universally in all areas of the 7 universes of creation, that is to say, in their material belts, and thus on planetary formations on which any kind of life exists. This is also related to rape and affective degenerations in relation to sexual acts, and also when this is only very rarely or never observed by human beings in other life forms. But the fact that it is actually the case that the sexual practices mentioned exist in all living beings is a reality, and it is important that the human being knows this. This also results in interminglings, which the human being consciously and deliberately uses to produce new species, etc., whereby new species and varieties, etc. arise, but which also result in new life forms according to nature, even if this contradicts every biology theory, etc., and is disputed by experts. This, of course, results just as consciously willed by the human being, who in no wise sets himself or herself any limits when he or she wants to achieve something in any form. What results in further forms, however, with regard to sadism and masochism, or even sadomasochism and sodomy, is generally the following, which does not correspond to a personality disorder, as experts falsely claim, but to a disorder of consciousness, because the personality can never be affected by any influences of a personal or foreign kind. And it is also to be said that when I speak of the limits which the earthling does not set for himself or herself, and thereby destroys much, then it is also to be said that nature is biologically founded in a different manner than so-called science claims, for out of it new genera and species arise, which, inexplicably for the wise scientists, are given in nature, like certain diverse assemblages from which new life results. Back then, when the dinosaurs existed, it was largely natural events that led to the disappearance of the great living creatures. At that time, by the way, even if it is vehemently denied by the great scientists and mad know-it-alls and insulted as wild fantasy, there were also human beings who, however, were not born here on Earth, but who actually existed, as I once saw on a journey back into the past with Svath. Aha! So you are researching what all went on in your father's day?
Yes. Through that, I also found a fossilized excrement of a human being there, which is called coprolite on Earth. When I examined it closely, I was astonished to find that the excrement was 74 million years old. You have traveled together very far back in time, much further than only 25 million years ago.
Yes, that was very interesting for me, because that is how I learned a lot of things that had already happened at very early times, when no Earthlings had yet been created on Earth through evolution. And it is to be said that in those early times, many things, indeed many things, were quite different from what the all-knowing ones of today claim, precisely those who concern themselves with the past. So, I think I may now speak openly and say that beings from the depths of the space of this universe visited the Earth before there were Earthlings. Since then, however, their descendants have come here again and again, creating many things for the human beings of the Earth in the last 390,000 years or so, which were often only achieved with hovering techniques. Whether the people who traveled far and wide were always persons of the same people, and also whether it was later their descendants who came here, and who, I do not know. But it is to be assumed that the various groups were somehow connected. What is clear to me, however, is that some of the long-distance travelers rose up as gods who were then worshipped by the Earthlings and to whom human sacrifices were also made. Some of them were real giants of different sizes, but there were also human beings of normal sizes, and then also dwarfs of normal size, thus not microsomic human beings. Microsomia refers to humans with abnormally small bodies, and there were also long-skulled and tall-skulled people, which was then imitated by the Earthlings by integrating the skulls of infants. Svath explained that most of these long-distance travelers had mixed with the Earthlings all over the world, so that it would also be the case in the distant future that tall stature, long-skulledness and tall-skulledness would be preserved, and that Earthlings of this kind would be born again and again if they traced back to the lineages of the mixing at that time. Unfortunately, such beings from the vastness of the material belt also brought various bacteria and viruses to Earth, which since then have been spreading worldwide from time to time, and even causing health havoc.
Our presence has to remain undetectable, because our directives have recently been updated, because certain foresights concerning the future of earthly humanity and the foreigners are very unpleasant and require a stricter observance of our instructions concerning our activity on Earth. For us, it is important that we fathom the activities of the foreigners very carefully, inside and out. Apart from the knowledge gained from this, we also know that we have to keep to what we have always maintained, namely that we remain unrecognized, both in relation to Earth's humanity and in relation to the foreigners, whose technology is very far behind ours, but whom they would inevitably want to get hold of if they could come into contact with us. We know very well their aspirations, and are able to anticipate what would result from contact with them. To this I can only explain that we Plaiaran really have no interest whatsoever in interfering in any earthly matters, neither in political nor in private affairs. Nor do we influence any Earth humans, nor do we make any attacks on Earth humans, nor on military or technical matters.
Contact Report 831.
Much is happening today so infamously hidden that it is not known to the peoples, which is why the striving for more power of the state powers and all financial institutions has not only promoted their criminality, crime, and corruption in such a wise that, in imitating them, everything similar has also taken hold in the populations, so that all this can no longer be changed. According to our investigations and findings, all this has taken on such degenerations in the last 150 years that a new form has arisen, which has been spreading more and more for years, namely, the electronic one, which has not proved itself in the long run with regard to the payment of purchasable goods and finally the payment for work. This was the experience of our ancestors, which is why the means of payment for all kinds of goods and wages for work were completely abolished by us Pleiaren some 52,000 years ago, since we turned to peace. This also had the consequence that all financial crime and crimes of the same kind immediately became a thing of the past and never appeared again. All production sites for any kind of goods became the common property of all peoples, while work was no longer paid for with wages, because no means of payment were necessary anymore, because everything desired and necessary for life could be acquired without them. In the course of time, as a result of more modern technology, working hours were also reduced, so that today only 2 working hours per day are required per person to do what has to be done. Our era is about the same size as the Earth, so our world population is correctly only 530 million, which would also correspond to the Earth's humanity, which is also what the Earth's population should strive for. In this manner, Earth humans are on the way to one day being dominated, enslaved and harassed by artificial intelligence, as had also happened to our distant ancestors, who were only able to become free of everything again by abruptly destroying all artificial intelligences before they realized that they had been destroyed. This had to be done by a secretly organized agreement. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to free oneself from the artificial intelligence. However, yesterday I came across, while reading the annals, that I may mention more than before that with regard to those who are simply called foreigners by us, I may openly say that my father Svath and you observed them already in early times. In this respect, especially their ancestors on earth, how they have wrought, and in some cases allowed themselves to be worshipped as gods. But they were of the same character as Earth humans, good or evil, and thus beings who were friendly or unfriendly, helpful or exploitative, peaceful, aggressive, open, devious, and even warlike. All these deities, as Svath, my father, writes in his annals, were of various shapes and sizes, but human beings who—
Yes, I know that. There were all kinds of shapes, but I did not see any like Asina, for example, reptile-like, as I call them. Note: see Contact Reports 90, 91, and 93 for information on Billy's first encounter with Asina.
So I will say more about what I was talking about before. As my father wrote, the foreigners of that time, whose distant descendants can still be observed in earthly airspace, were of a female nature, but also male Earth humans in great numbers, who allowed themselves to be worshipped and glorified, but also built many buildings, etc., and taught Earth's humanity various forms of writing. Many of their buildings and other works were only possible because of their highly developed technological abilities and their potentialities. The foreigners, however, also exalted themselves above the Earth humans, but they also taught them a great deal about the cosmos and the stars, which Earth humans who were interested in them already dealt with in very early times. This, as well as the coming into existence of the Earth humans, which is different from what is wrongly taught on the Earth, is the actual origin of the coming into existence, as well as the origin of various races which are not of Earth origin. But what I still have to say is the following. Over thousands of years, Earth humans have, on their own initiative, imitated the constructions, etc., that were made by the ancestors of the foreigners in a primitive manner. Furthermore, it is to be mentioned that we Pleiaren have to adhere to the strict directive that we must keep away from the foreigners at all costs. Although they have developed their technology to such an extent that they could and can reach Earth and other worlds from the territory of their home stars, they are unable to penetrate our dimension of our universe. And we are obliged by our directives that the foreigners never find the possibility to advance RESP, penetrate into our dimension, because our, according to earthly time calculation, very laboriously won state of peace about 52,000 years ago could be endangered by intruders.
Contact Report 832.
Tell me rather, this is a question that is often put to me, how it is with the women with you, whether they bother with makeup. For my part, I do not know that either, except that all the Pleiaren women I know personally are never painted up.
There you are asking a question for which you actually know the answer, because our female gender does not know this bad habit of self-defacement of the face, fingers, and body, as well as hair. Hair is necessarily dyed, with medical means for medical reasons when this is necessary, but when the state of health no longer requires it, then the dyeing is stopped. The women on Era frown upon any form of self-defacement of their naturalness.
So they do not use lipstick, eyebrow pencil, nail polish, just as they do not use plumping or padding injections, skincare products, and so on and so forth?
To that I already said that such is absolutely frowned upon because only the natural is preserved and maintained.
That's why I have never seen a woman on Era painting herself.
Contact Report 833.
The non-Earth humans, and thus the ancestors of the foreigners, those of warned of this climate change, planetary warm period, and of overpopulation thousands of years ago, and declared that Earth's humanity should be kept on a small scale and not bred in excess. But this was thoroughly misunderstood by those idiots and self-seekers and elements and know-it-alls who pose as prophets and God's messengers, which is why they devised themselves as self-appointed wise men and God's commanders, and claimed the opposite of what was correct. So they falsified all the warnings of the Earth foreigners and lied out of it, go and multiply. All this was first predicted thousands of years ago by a truth-bringer, and those Earth foreigners who were able to fathom the distant future on Earth, and therefore knew what the future would bring. And all of the knowledge in this regard has proven and resulted to be correct to this day. Thus, however, what is really clearly foretold will continue to come to pass, for it is inevitable, and much is determined solely by the human beings of the Earth themselves, very often by overpopulation and the unreasonableness of those who instigate wars.
Contact Report 834.
You do not inform everybody else about what is going on in your work area and what is being done, etc., as I know. This is what I was told at one time.
This is indeed so, for we do not mix our fields of work with those of other persons of the same kind, for each has its individual methods which we do not spread to others, for in this way discriminatory differences do not appear which would cause discord. Certain methods and work procedures, etc., can be asked about and also answered for better application, but otherwise individual work methods and results are absolutely not addressed. This only happens when special information meetings take place in this regard, where this and that is discussed.
Contact Report 835.
From time immemorial, the number 12 has been the value of all things, as well as the fact that the ancient ones who came here had 12 fingers and toes instead of 10. They also mixed with the earthlings at that time, so that it still happens today that very distant descendants are once again equipped with it. precisely that they are born with 12 fingers and 12 toes. In addition, there is actually a whole tribe of indigenous people living in the jungle in South America, untouched by civilization, whose human beings each have 12 fingers and 12 toes, as I saw for myself when I was there with Svath. Of course, 12 fingers on the hands and 12 toes on the feet are called bodily aberrations or the like by earthly scientists. It is not known to them, after all, that it is a complete naturalness that was once brought here, and can now and then break through as heredity in earthlings, whose very early ancestry of parents goes back thousands of years. But this cannot be fathomed, just as it cannot be fathomed that their very early ancestors had mixed with the hereditary ones. As a rule, however, the true earlier ancestry of the ancestors thousands of years ago cannot be fathomed, which leads back to the parents of 12-fingered children and 12-toed descendants.
Contact Report 836.
We Pleiaren have maintained neutrality in our Federation for more than 52,000 years, with the whole Federation, in Earth terms, encompassing worlds and solar systems many light years across. Our neutrality ensures absolute peace and freedom throughout the Federation for all existing species of human beings, who are of various types and accordingly have a different appearance from that known to Earth's human beings. They are all, however, human beings who have their own forms of personality, consciousness and mind, peculiarity and individuality, habit, nature, attitude, nature and specificity, peculiarity and characteristic, and so on.
But are human beings, like Asina, for example, who is described by me as reptilian, and as I know, also of those whom I know personally, all have their own quirks and characteristics, as well as manners, their personal peculiarities and manners, needs, preferences and desires, and so on. However, all those I was allowed to get to know here on Earth and on Era, and indeed all of them, from the smallest dwarfs of about 80 centimeters, to the titans of over 5 meters in height, and the acid people, who are 6-fingered and honored our cars with their acid hands and acid fingerprints, which did not exactly cause vain joy among some of our center inhabitants, were really human beings and not some kind of monsters, even if they were and are not the same in appearance as the Earthlings. A human being is a human being, no matter what he looks like, no matter whether he is an Earthling, or comes from far away from the depths of the cosmos, or from one of the 6 other cosms of the different universes of creation.
I don't think I need to reply to that. But with regard to neutrality, I have something to say, namely what we Pleiaren understand by it, and that for more than 52,000 years, when our ancestors introduced it, Extraterrestrial, as we call it, we have really had peace and freedom throughout our vast Federation, which was not the case before with our very early ancestors for millions of years. When they first found passage into the cosmos of your universe dimension, some 25 million years ago, our ancestors were still warlike.
Contact Report 836.
What he said I never forget, and because I did not know Darwin's language, I had to wear the little translator that Svath had given me so that I could understand Darwin's speeches, as was also the case with others whose language I did not understand. Asket and your daughter Simyase also gave me similar devices so that I could understand what was being said.
Contact Report 838.
That our ancestors then brought the lineage of Nocodemion, and with it his teachings to Earth, that was a decision that was only taken about 190,000 years ago, when the Pleiaren settlers on Earth began to cultivate the teachings of Nocodemion. This, while others from the depths of this universe had already been on the planet for a long time, but from whom the ancestors of the Pleiaren kept away, which is also how it has remained. Consequently, the foreigners, as Ptah and you call them, had no knowledge of the Pleiaren settlers until they were no more. This is also how it has remained ever since, up to the present time, with regard to our controlling presence. The fact is that we Pleiaren came to Earth very early in ancient times, and were active here, and did many things without making ourselves known in any way to Earth's humanity. And the fact that we do not let ourselves be seen, just as we do not openly appear, keeps us well and safely free, and able to move about without being hindered in our work. But if I want to mention something concerning our task, it is effectively not based on interfering with the events of humanity here on Earth, but our presence has been directed since time immemorial solely towards observing and registering how everything is developing, because our peoples and Federation members are interested in how far everything has to go until an overpopulation arises through a religious mania, to the extent that such an overpopulation completely destroys a planet and all life. Even our peoples of our distant ancestors kept records of how everything developed in this cosmos, of this universe on this world you call Earth.
Thousands of years ago, the faraway travelers secured through standing waves enormous energies and a distribution of energy all around the planet. Consequently, everything was also completely different from what is claimed by the experts nowadays. It is very interesting that the foreigners did not even know, as you say, that the Giza twerps had been on Earth for a long time and were up to their mischief.
Why are these women here so coated with red lips?
I took this booklet from the kitchen over there because I want to read an article in it. With the women here on Earth, it is unfortunately the case that many do this because they probably believe that it beautifies them.
But look how these women have painted their lips red. That is really disgusting.
Yes, that is really disgusting. We do not do that here on Era. It looks really disgusting.
A lot of women do it on Earth because they think it's beautiful. Smearing your lips with the so-called lipstick is just in with many, you know that.
Yes, but it is so disgusting.
I can only agree with Florina. It really is very repulsive and disgusting. It is incomprehensible to me that Earth women use this disgusting painting because they perhaps think that it makes their appearance appear more favorable. But this is not the case because it makes the face look so distorted and unnatural with this smearing on the lips.
Yes, it is. It really disfigures the face.
That is unfortunately the case, and I know that on Era you do not use any makeup. But here on Earth it is different, because here there is a delusion among these women that painting the lips and such is advantageous.
We do not see it that way because it has an effect and it is disgusting.
Contact Report 839.
How big are the biggest snakes with you on Era? Unfortunately, so far I've not been able to admire these creeping things on Era.
We also have snakes on Era, even if you have not seen any yet.
Contact Report 840.
I have some questions here that should be passed on to the Gremium Pleiaren Committee Yarshos Board.
Contact Report 841.
The phantasmagoria of space travel is also of no use here. Inevitable extinction of life on Earth due to the effects of overpopulation, because until it is finally so far that the Earthling can travel in space, which only begins outside the Sol system and not already outside the Earth's gravity, a great deal of time will pass if the foreigners from outside do not intervene and help the crazy Earth's humanity, or enslave and abduct them.
Contact Report 842.
We also deal with many areas of earthly processes, but not with religions and their connections and so on, because in that respect we want to...
I understand that, because your ancestors had very bad experiences with it, from which they could only free themselves a little more than 52,000 years ago.
When,
The sphere came. Note, see Contact Report 710-169, 2-171, 711-47+, and 728-179, 2-182.
Contact Report 844.
In addition to all this, I think it should be mentioned that if the foreigners, who were already spread all over the earth in ancient times, and some of whose distant ancestors in the Indus Valley in Pakistan, did something that could have been avoided if pure reason had prevailed there too, but which is obviously lacking in all human life forms, then many things would have been different since time immemorial. But ignorance and imprudence are a fact that must also be attributed to the old and new foreigners, even if they were technically far ahead of the Earthlings and are still ahead today. They have been circling around in earthly airspace since time immemorial and thus, since time immemorial. But nevertheless they have nothing to do with what is attributed to them in connection with certain Earthlings.
Contact Report 845.
We Plejaren learn to be always non-judgmental in every process, but always fact-perceiving, fact-seeing as well as fact-naming, and absolutely never fact-judging and fact-partisan.
I already know from Svath that you Plejaren literally inhale earthly books and do not have to read them as we Earthlings do, but by a certain technique you simply absorb a whole book, or about 6,000 pages within about an hour or two, and register everything as a whole in your memory.
Yes, it is indeed the case that we can acquire book knowledge in a very short time, which would take months or years through normal reading.
Svath explained to me that for the time being, once a work, a book, etc. is set up, it can be independently read in a short time, and thereafter it is accessible to everyone and can be inhaled in said process. As he explained to me, what has been read and then remains stored timelessly, and is available to any human beings who want to listen in to it.
That is so, yes.
Contact Report 848.
Not even the foreigners, despite their technological advances in terms of quantum technology and nanotechnology and so on, are able to locate our flying apparatus or ourselves. For the Plejaren, who have nothing to do with the Pleiades, who have been haunting earthly history since time immemorial, keep aloof from it in every respect. Consequently, they would also not interfere with an iota in any matters, etc. They never did, nor do they do, anything that could affect anything on Earth or among the Earthlings. The Plejaren and all their Federation members remain absolutely and in all respects neutral, without ever doing an iota to interfere in any earthly matter. Billy, the Plejaren have never done anything to interfere in earthly affairs since time immemorial, when they first came here to Earth, as they do not to this day. Contrary to the foreigners, as we call those who came here from the far reaches of space at very early times and are still in earthly space, the Plejaren have never been active or otherwise noticeable on Earth in any manner. Billy.
Contact Report 849.
We Plejaren, as well as our Federates as a whole, are not at home in this time structure and thus not in this universe of creation, but are displaced in space, that is to say, dimension and time in another of the 7 universes of creation. This, as well as others from our lineage, who, however, come from a universe that is to say dimensional structure of the twin sister creation, come here to Earth, as do we Plejaren, because you work here with regard to the teaching that leads back to Nokademion, and which is also taught with us, and through which our peoples became peaceful, and in this process sociable with each other. But when you are no more, then we will all withdraw for good, so that after 25 million years, when our distant ancestors found the passage anomaly to this space-time continuum and came here, we will then leave this universe space RESP, the dimensional structure of creation. I still have to explain that our appearance here was based on the prediction that our distant ancestors saw more than 25 million years ago, that in the future, the teaching of Nokademion would be spread on this planet Earth, which is why also already at that time the anomaly of the passage from our universe into this one was used to move here. However, always and throughout the entire duration, from then until now, we remained strictly bound by the time of our distant ancestors and their descendants, and so also we ourselves, to what was decided. For this was the word that no interference in earthly affairs would ever take place without an official alliance with some authoritative earthly might of this earth planet. Our ancestors were never involved in bringing any religions to Earth, just as no buildings, etc., were created by them, as the earlier foreigners did, on the other hand, and elevated themselves above Earth's humanity. But the foreigners were never so stupid as to supply Earth humans with weapons.
Contact Report 850.
I am interested in when warfare would end, that is to say, when the last war would be fought among you, Pleiaren.
I can answer that question for you, because that is part of our general knowledge that we Pleiaren learn. The last war our ancestors fought was about 142 years ago, involving territorial claims.
Contact Report 851.
This is very interesting, although it is not an anomaly, as is probably assumed by earthly scientists and called polydactyly by them. What I see here pictorially points to very distant descendants of foreigners who came to the Earth from a distant galaxy many millennia ago and mated with Earth humans, whose descendants and again their descendants, etc., passed on physical peculiarities down to the present time, thus testifying to the immigration of foreigners to the Earth at very early times.
Something that is still denied today by the too clever ones of anthropology and other bright minds, and sharp ones, and know-it-alls as well as other negators of truth, because in reality, and in their lowly intelligence, they are only illusory thinkers, and incapable of putting one and one together. Besides, there were once the six-fingered little ones here in the center, who left their handprints on the bonnets of cars and burnt them into the paintwork. This is because the little ones of this kind have a kind of acid skin, which means that on our world their touches on earthly materials leave acidic marks. We also have photos of this that someone has taken of the acid imprints of the touches. However, these little ones with the acid skin have nothing to do with the other little ones, the Trilons, who come from completely different worlds.
As long as I can remember, we never learned to think and act other than neutrally. Consequently, we do not cultivate opinions, but only fact-based.
Contact Report 852.
Bernadette told me that I had mentioned something wrong, namely concerning the Trilonern and Andromedans. Somehow I must have confused the two. Note: see previous contact report entry 851.
That cannot be, because I seem to remember correctly that you were talking about the little Trilonern in the context of the six-fingered family living in Brazil.
That's right. Bernadette gave me this page number here from the conversation report. Wait, I will look in the report. Look, this. Yes, here it is, page 7705. Yes, here. It says, however, these little ones with the acid skin have nothing to do with the other little ones, the Trilonern, who come from completely different worlds. So it is correct and not a mistake. Wait a minute. I will phone Bernadette right away. So it was misunderstood, because it was assumed that the other little ones, the Trilonern, meant the Andromedans, because I also call them little ones. I never talked about the fact that there are other Trilonern without acid skin, who come from another world in the same planetary system, but who have nothing to do with the Andromedans, but who were also not here with the acidic buddies, but who came here at a later time. As a result, no one also knew anything about these little ones. And because there was no contact with them, it also soon disappeared from my memory without me telling anything about these little ones and their visit. For me, it was simply that they were here once, and that was that. Earlier we were talking about me forgetting this and that, like the visits of the non-acidic triliner. This is also the case with you, as I know that you also know forgetfulness, as I know from Svath and Ptah. Both told me that it was inevitable because it would be burdensome to remember everything that had happened in life.
Yes, that corresponds to the truth. A good memory is valuable, but if human beings were able to remember too much, they would, as you once said, go mad. We Pleiaren also show memory deficits, which corresponds absolutely to the norm of humanity. So if we show memory deficits according to the years we have lived through, then this corresponds to an absolute normality, which is also determined by health. And if you are therefore classified as having memory loss, especially when I consider your effective age, then that is completely normal. The memory does not simply diminish and become weaker, but the memory covers up certain values and thus creates a relief, whereby the health of the memory is preserved. Consequently, a memory becomes partially or completely current again, if a memory is stimulated by any circumstances or indications from fellow human beings. As a result, already in ancient times, tremendous killings were committed all over the earth and in many lands. As I know from records that I read before I came here and oriented myself a little more closely with regard to the history of Earth mankind, which Svath researched and also summarized in annals. He also used records that were made by very early visitors of our ancestors up to 25 million years before our time, which we found in the sphere, you know. They were...
Yes, I know which sphere you mean, which is actually a huge and many millions of years old library sphere.
Correct. They were records. From when the natural dimensional gate was found, and the first of our very distant ancestors came through that into this Dern universe, and ultimately to this Earth. All the records of the library sphere, as you call it, showed us other dimensional gateways near which some of our peoples settled on life-bearing planets. Furthermore, through the information records in the sphere, we became aware that at the time 267 million years ago, it was discovered that this creation corresponded to a twin creation, as well as that a way was found to enter the sister creation, the Dajansini Arg Laser Neuralin, that is to say, the second-born creation, the twin creation. Consequently, 2 of our distant ancestral peoples emigrated to the sister creation and settled there.
Aha! Then they were the ancestors of the Sonair and Asket's people. As Svath told me, there had been contact between them and the Pleiaren for millions of years, but Svath could not explain to me how this came about.
I suppose that is understandable. For everything fell into oblivion, and the knowledge of the origin only became known to us when you were able to open the orb, which was sealed to all and could not be opened.
Why that was so, I did not know then, as I still do not know now. Perhaps you can still find the secret solution on some records. And when foreigners from the far reaches of the cosmos came to Earth, did miraculous things and also built giant structures, these were also worshipped as gods.
Contact Report 856.
My father wrote, and this is what I want to speak to you about specifically, namely, that you also made studies concerning the foreigners and observed many things for this purpose in very ancient times, and that they not only erected very great buildings by sound vibrations, but also brought medical knowledge to Earth. But these have been lost and forgotten in the course of the millennia that have passed, just as the great foreigners Horus, Danvantari, Thor, etc. have been. I am also very interested in what my daughter Simyase told me, what she did with you, how you got to know the men Ketch, Duramke, Forrestal and Area 18, as well as Gajat, Merlin and the foreigners working on Earth at that time, etc., and what they told you before the foreigners left and the Earth humans known to you were all murdered by the secret services of the USA. And I want to know a lot more from you than what I can only read in the annals. The foreigners have been around for thousands of years, and will probably also stay around. But we have always kept away from them for certain reasons, including their home worlds in this cosmos. With regard to them, the whole thing will become acutely topical in America, and enlightenment will be demanded. Because you together, you, Father and you, have created clarifications at very early times in the past, with regard to which I want to learn a little more from you, especially, however, about their highly developed medicine, because as a physician I am particularly interested in this, as also in how the early foreigners taught their knowledge on Earth to those who were suitable for it. The value of neutrality has also existed with us for more than 50,000 years, namely with the term aphonikratun.
Contact Report 858.
Note: see Contact Reports 90, 91, and 93 for information on Billy's first encounter with Asina. I once talked about this many years ago with Asina, the very amphibian woman who, amazingly enough, used about the same language as you are using now. Asina was a very special being and came from a people who called themselves Dogon, or something like that, as she also said another name, but I do not remember the context. And she also told me that her very, very early ancestors were able to cross over into the Ankar universe, and then emigrated there from a planet in our cosmos, from a system that was about 8 or 9 light years away from Earth and had a large sun that could be seen from Earth. However, there was another small structure near this system that could not be seen from Earth with the naked eye. From this system, that is to say from its planets, various beings, that is to say species or so of amphibian people, but also other human beings, etc., had come to Earth thousands of years ago, and as she knew, their most distant descendants were still here. With whom, however, for some reason unknown to me, they did not want to maintain any contact. And when I think about what Asina said about this, I think about the foreigners and the UFOs that are observed again and again all over the world. I did not want to say that at the time, but now it is perhaps interesting to know for those who want to know where Asina's distant ancestors actually came from. This, as well as what else she said, is interesting, namely that today's descendants of the dog have had no connection with the Dogon, that is to say with Asina's people, for more than 800,000 years. Asina's people who, she said, actually call themselves Dogon, according to the ancient term dog, belong to the Plejaren Federation. And what else is to be said? These creatures, which look like reptiles, are those who, however, as Asina said, have changed tremendously physically and no longer bear any resemblance to those who emigrated to the Ankar universe ages ago. And Asina only came to Earth and to me because she was otherwise already in our universe, and that was because she was supposed to investigate what is happening there today in the system that is 8 or 9 light years or so away from Earth, and is actually the true origin of the Dogon.
Contact Report 860.
Emmanuel's name was already in use since ancient times, that is to say at the time of the original Hebrews, who were called Ebrea, and of which the distant descendants, today's believers in the Jews, no longer know anything, because there are absolutely no more traditions about it. This people was led at that time by a rather deep black African called Avian in the land of Pekt. The original leader was a very distant Negrid descendant of a very small black-skinned Plejaren group that settled in Africa more than 13,500 years ago as immigrants and mixed with Earth's humanity, but kept away from the foreigners so that they never noticed that Plejaren were on this world. The foreigners, who had been on Earth for a very long time and whose distant homeland was 8 or 9 light years away from our world, did not realize the presence of the few Plejaren, whose descendants died out completely in the course of time. You Plejaren have nothing to do with the foreigners and their UFOs.
While it is correct that this has been talked about, the committee now finds it imperative, as you should be aware, that it has ordered something specific in this regard. Namely, so that no misunderstandings arise, that we Plearan have nothing whatsoever to do with the so-called UFOs and their crews. We Plearan keep away from them, and also do not allow Earth humans to observe us through the appearance of our flying apparatus in the airspace. We also do not allow ourselves to be located, observed or otherwise elicited by the foreigners in any manner, which has been so held since time immemorial, for we Plearan are not interested in any life forms from this Dern universe realm entering the realm of our Ankar universe realm of creation.
Contact Report 862.
You are not young as you were then, but that you have grown older, as well as your appearance is much different from the earlier time when we used to do various things together with my brother. I know this from the pictorial recordings that are broadcast in our house from time to time when special events occur.
But you still speak Swiss German after so many years as you did back then. You obviously have not forgotten it.
What you say about speaking, yes, this has remained with me, because I find the language remarkably good, which is why I have formed a circle in which all members are interested in learning and speaking it. Moreover, it should be mentioned that in this way we also preserve other languages acutely. Consequently, they are not forgotten, because, as I said, we speak them in circles and preserve them that way. In this manner, they do not fall into oblivion, neither in speaking nor in writing.
I did not know that. I guess in circles means groups, right?
That is so. But now you know the reason why I still speak Swiss German.
I have been thinking for some time that the time has come to say why you Plearan are still here on Earth, and why you did not leave our Dern universe millions of years ago and return to your ancestral Ankar universe. And it is to be said that something was quite different at the beginning of our contacts with Simya Se and Ptah, namely that you let yourselves be seen, especially towards our members, visitors, as well as various interested parties of Figui, but also local residents, such as Mrs. Furrer from the post office in Schmidruti, or Walter Balmer from Sitzburg, who could even photograph Ptah's flying apparatus. However, this was suddenly disconnected when the military, which had the missile defense station here above Schmidruti, but which has been dismantled in the meantime, and the authorities became even more intrusive than they already were, because we were the foreign fools, which we obviously still are, because we are being harassed again by the authorities.
Further things are known to us, however, because we have always been and are also still being informed in detail about all the events that have occurred and continue to occur here on Earth. In any case, at least those human beings on all of Error who are interested in what is happening here on this world know everything that is important, for it is the same on all worlds that a part of the people is only interested in this and that, just as another part wants to know only very sparsely or not at all what is happening. What I now have to explain in regard to your question, however, is that we Plearan, and indeed our earliest ancestors, have remained here on Earth because foresighted people have recognized that in the far future human beings will degenerate here on this world and indulge in a divine faith as well as in all evil, hatred, killing, revenge, persecution and wars, and with it murder, etc., as was already the case with our primeval peoples, whose most distant future peoples only found true peace some 50,000 years ago in the earthly calendar, which had already been striven for over millions of years by the efforts of righteous people and their successors and followers and successors, and so on. And when this finally became reality, the beginning was not easy, however, because there were still no human beings who really knew how true peace had to be created, shaped, and handled. Later, however, this already changed when human beings and human-like beings developed completely naturally into peace beings. Also in this Dern universe and on this world, the Earth, foreigners came very early who created influences, whereby in time the natural of evolution constantly diminished and what led the human beings of this world to degeneracy, as it also happened elsewhere in this Dern universe since time immemorial, for which we could find the reason in the fact that the same happened as here on this world. This degeneracy, which also existed in our Ankar universe at the beginning of its existence and the first time of intelligent evolution among human beings, but has not existed for a very long time. Our earlier righteous ancestors wanted to counteract very early, millions of years ago, but all their efforts always failed among the peoples. Through excursions to other worlds inhabited by human beings or human-like life forms in this Dern universe, they also learned, which is known to you from my brother Svarth and your travels, that the aberrations of the human and human-like species are virtually everywhere in this universe. This, whereby invaders of such inhabitants into other planetary systems, and thus when appearing on other worlds, have acted and continue to act as gods and the like to their halfway intelligent inhabitants. If they are not met with logic, understanding, and reason, and consequently, because they are highly developed in their knowledge and skill and in their technology, etc., are seen and worshipped as gods. We play Yaren, however, do not come to Earth to make contact with Earth humans, and indeed, we do not want anything from them. Just as we do not want to make contact with that is to say, the foreigners, as we call them, but we only come here because you teach and spread the teaching of Nocademion, which has been established since time immemorial, to Earth humans. To do something like this was decided some 25 million years ago by our distant ancestors of that time, even though they themselves had succumbed to most of the same evils as the human beings on this world Earth did later. But the righteous of the peoples of that time already determined the becoming of the mission on this world in this Dern universe about 25 million years ago, and the decision at that time actually outlasted the time of 25 million years. Consequently, however, more than 50,000 years ago, the decision that had survived until then was also taken up, and it was decided that the request that had been made at that time should now be put into practice. Consequently, everything was prepared in such a manner that what was decided could come about. Then everything was arranged at the exact time that the intended mission could begin, and thus the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life could find its beginning on this world, which signifies the real life of the human being, whose path he is to follow and the value he is to develop within himself and become truly human beings. But this causes much more difficulties and permanent crushes than were expected, for more and more influence is exerted by the religions, just as for some time now the foreigners have also been making themselves more and more felt, acting as gods, which is why the killing of human beings began, who were intended as offerings to the gods. This was because the foreigners did not intervene and did not stop the horrors in this regard, although they came here and demanded that human beings should not be sacrificed or killed in any other way. This, however, gave rise to new strife among the human beings in this world, for the views developed that under all circumstances the statements of the foreigners had to be given conscientious consideration, which ultimately led to delusional ideas that these statements corresponded to a commandment and law and were classified accordingly, with the meaning that severe punishments were to be meted out if they were violated. On the one hand, this was a misunderstanding of the whole, and on the other hand, only the killing of those who violated it was appropriate. So it was not far off that human sacrifices were quickly demanded and offered in order to win the conscientious attention of the foreigners, that is to say, gods, and to reassure them when what they claimed to do correctly was violated. But how they taught and demanded not to kill was misunderstood by human beings and, moreover, disregarded, so that people did not think and act according to the true meaning. Killing thus became a case of quick revenge and retribution from time immemorial, and this in turn gave rise to hatred, hence also wars, terror, degeneracy, destruction, extermination, and murder, etc. Faith-wise, everything in this regard was spread and practiced very quickly. Thus, through the appearance and the misleading teaching of the foreigners to the earth humans, exactly the wrong thing was done, which has been preserved until today, namely, that which should never become with the human beings, namely a faith in place of thinking for oneself and grasping reality and truth. Our very distant ancestors found a natural creation-like dimension gate in our Ankar universe, which enabled a connection to this Dern universe about 25 million years ago. The origin was the occurrence of who entered this Dern universe from our Ankar universe through the natural dimensional gate. It was brought by our distant ancestors to an artificially generated approximate speed of light, after which they followed this object, which finally brought them here to Earth. And it is to be said again in particular that we will neither make contact with the human beings here on Earth nor with the foreign ones. And precisely for this purpose, our committee also wishes you to proclaim the following call as the foremost entry on your website. Proclamation. The flying apparatuses called UFOs by Earth humans have no relation to us, Pleiaren, and our flying apparatuses. The flying apparatuses of the foreigners, as well as the incidents of any kind concerning them, which have occurred or will continue to occur in connection with the flying objects, as well as with the foreigners themselves, do not concern us, Pleiaren. We Pleiaren have in no wise interfered in any earthly events, and will also never interfere, whatever may happen. We Pleiaren will therefore not interfere in any earthly matters, events, and occurrences that may arise in the future, this also not in one or the other context concerning the foreigners and their UFO flying apparatus.
But what is happening here on Earth with the foreigners and their UFOs is already much more than is announced and really happens in this regard. They are still covering themselves up, but they are obviously slowly on the way to being revealed.
Contact Report 863.
Obviously, here in this world, logic, understanding, and reason are not yet so far developed in any wise among human beings, and are still so primitive. that these values are not able to take hold in such a manner that it is recognized that partisanship is absolutely the wrong thing to do in order to lead a state and its people. Knowing this very well, we have no party of any kind. Consequently, our error body is also free from any party system, just as there are no parties of any kind elsewhere on error.
I know that. Also that with you, votes are taken solely by the vast body which represents the whole population of Era, and whose members are never the same, but at every meeting are different ones from the whole Pleiaren humanity, and also never become noisy or even quarrelsome.
Contact Report 863.
If I go on to say something about the whole thing, it is that, as soon as the human being does something that does not suit others, is not understood, cannot be comprehended, is envied or simply does not fit, etc., hostility immediately arises, even though no one is inconvenienced or offended by it or comes to harm. It doesn't matter what it is about and how insignificant everything is, why the victim is attacked or maltreated, because the only thing that matters is that the victim should somehow be harmed, harassed, or even killed because someone else simply doesn't like what they are doing. This very quickly leads to insults, harassment, destruction, or fights are instigated, or even attacks on life are committed, and those who are hated or simply envied for some sick and idiotic reason are murdered.
This is well known to me, for we Pleiaren learn from our earliest adolescence that such behavior can never appear, for it has been known to us from time immemorial that this is a characteristic of those human beings who are selfish, as was the case with our ancestors in earlier times. However, when this was investigated and the reason was found that it was a form of jealousy and selfishness, then a subject of teaching was created in this respect, which became a duty of learning for every person in order to prevent the evil from arising. Therefore, it also became compulsory that even the adolescent is confronted with it and learns that this unworthy of mankind of behavior is learnt to combat at an early age in such a way that it already dissolves in its origins, and it can never become a factor that can become a reality.
Contact Report 864.
In any case, Ptah explained in this regard, I mean because of the Giza intelligences, that the Earth foreigners really had absolutely no knowledge that they, that is to say you Pleiaren, were on Earth at all and had been since time immemorial. Your locating technology defense is such, as Sim-Ya-Se already explained, as Ptah also confirmed, that you can never be located with the best equipment and devices in this respect, not to mention earthly attempts of this kind. Our military is also incapable of this, because all earthly tracking technology is still so primitive that it is pointless to even talk about it. It is true that attempts are made again and again to locate you or even to get hold of you, but this is as pointless as if water were carried into the Rhine to make it overflow. There is even photographic evidence that the surveillance is actually taking place, although everything is denied through all the grounds, as also the fact that back in my winkle, a jet fighter followed Sim-Ya-Se for about 10 minutes, as she visibly circled around for a long time with her beamship, and then simply disappeared, and that after I was still able to take a photo, whereby I was able to photograph Sim-Ya-Se's beamship and the jet fighter together. See Contact Report 52.
Excuse me, but in addition, I would like to read out what you wrote in Teacher Lehman's natural history lessons, which was in a notebook that Svath took and left in his estate. At that time, he was allowed to do that, because at that time no special precautions were required, as they had been raised and introduced in our country about 60 years ago, because many new pathogens were spreading on Earth and caused us Pleiaren to be more careful.
Yes, I am aware of that. Suddenly, everything was then disconnected, as well as that consequently the stricter precautions were imposed on Federation members as well.
That was so, yes. We have been spared from the introduction of any pathogens as a result, and since then.
Contact Report 865.
Furthermore, I want to explicitly mention this in particular. We have no interest whatsoever in interfering in any matters of terrestrial concern.
As for the foreigners with their UFOs, that is another matter. But I do not want to say anything about it, for it is none of my business, just as you also remain neutral in every way and distance yourselves completely from them, and do not want to have anything to do with them, just as you do with the earthly military and security forces. And you do this in such a way that even the foreigners with their futuristic technology and their other possibilities could not locate you, because the sonar technology is much more highly developed than that of the peoples who whiz around in earthly airspace with their UFOs.
It is all peaceful and harmless, which it should remain, and neither the security of the earthly states nor the earth, its entire nature itself, nor its fauna and flora are in any way affected, but only our Pleiaren endeavor of our evolutionary and peaceful progress with regard to the Nacademian doctrine which you impart to us.
Even the most highly developed earthly technology is still so primitive that they cannot even locate you, as even the foreigners cannot do, although they are vastly superior to earthly technology. A disadvantage that unfortunately will not be pleasing to the Earthlings in the future, as I know, because the foreigners are...
Contact Report 866 tar wiretapped. Firstly, I want to say that it is obviously very important that it is specifically mentioned again openly and made really clear that we are not connected with the foreigners who have been observed and seen for many years in Earth humans' so-called UFOs in Earth's airspace. We effectively have nothing whatsoever to do with either the foreigners or their UFOs. Consequently, we also have no contact of any kind with the foreigners who navigate these flying apparatuses, nor do we have any other liaison with them.